Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mr. B. Today we have a very exciting show for you. We are discussing the latest development in the Iran war, and we are going to jump right into the story. Now, we use First Post as a publication. They're based out in India, but they tend to give a fair take on what's actually happening. It's a non-biased sort of publication, and so we've used them as our source of information. So let's go ahead and jump right into that.
So if there's something Donald Trump likes more than power, it is the performance of power. The dramatic entrances, the larger-than-life declarations, and now, according to a new book, he has something he lacked in his first term: experience. This book is titled Regime Change Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. It is penned by two New York Times journalists, and it paints a portrait of a Donald Trump who is no longer figuring out Washington. He believes he owns it. Here's what the authors argue. The real story of Donald Trump's second term isn't Trump. It's the absence of everyone who used to stop him. In his first term, there were lawyers, generals, aides, so-called guardrails, men and women who'd quietly slow walk an order, suggest a delay, whisper, "Mr. President, actually, you cannot do that." They're gone now. Trump spent 4 years learning exactly how government works and exactly who stood in his way. Then he came back in 2025 and cleared that room. According to this book, what's left is a White House that runs on loyalty, retribution, and the absolute conviction that Donald Trump is the most powerful human being who has ever lived. Yes, he said that. In an interview with the authors, Trump, who had just launched a war with Iran weeks prior, reflected on his power. He pulled out a two-page document, a list of the most powerful figures in history, and proceeded to explain why each of them fell short: Alexander the Great, William the Conqueror, Napoleon, Hitler, Mao, Stalin, Genghis Khan. They didn't have airplanes, Trump noted. Now, only Donald Trump could look at 2,000 years of human history and conclude that the main limitation of Alexander the Great was poor aviation infrastructure. Beneath the humor, though, Trump appears fascinated by power itself. Not just political power, the projection of power, the ability to shape events globally. And that's perhaps the central theme of this presidency. Not governance, dominance. Because just a few days ago, he reshared a post on Truth Social that described him as the most powerful person that has ever walked this planet. Now let's talk about something more unusual: Trump's relationship with sleep, or perhaps his relationship with not sleeping. In his second term, the US president has been filmed appearing to rest his eyes during several meetings. Even Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked about this in a recent Congress hearing.
Secretary Rubio, have you been at more than one meeting where President Trump has fallen asleep?
That's false. That's false. I've never seen him fall asleep. On the contrary, the guy doesn't sleep, which is a big problem because he calls me at 2 a.m, he calls me at 5 a.m. And, I like to sleep a little bit, maybe not 12 hours, but at least 6. So he works. The other day he was at the Oval Office until 12:30 p.m. 12:30 a.m. I don't know what you're talking about.
Now, according to the book, White House schedules have become increasingly unpredictable. Under Trump, apparently, in his White House, time is more of a suggestion than a rule. Meetings are often shifted, schedules are stretched, and late-night Truth Social posting has become almost a presidential hobby. There's another fascinating anecdote mentioned in this book, this time on India. Last year, during discussions about a possible peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, Vice President J.D. Vance reportedly floated the idea of involving Indian troops. Trump's reaction? A chuckle, followed by, and I'm quoting here, "The Indians won't do that." And then he reportedly referenced his friendship with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, Trump's second term has been dominated by his decision to bomb Iran. He started this war with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by his side. But lately, cracks have appeared in the duo's ties. The book describes this complicated relationship. At times, Trump reportedly admired Netanyahu. At other times, Trump allegedly referred to him as a con man. And if you follow Trump long enough, you'll know that's not just an insult, that's practically an impeachment in Trump language. According to the book, Trump initially wanted no part of a war with Iran, yet eventually he backed military action. This book details that the rift is not new. Last year, during negotiations over a ceasefire in Gaza, Trump reportedly held a very fiery conversation with Netanyahu. He reportedly told the Israeli leader that all Jews are sick of him. I will tell you more about this in our next story. For now, let's focus on the most entertaining section, Silicon Valley. Remember when big tech leaders treated Trump like a problem to be managed?
Smart founders know something most people miss. Get your domain name even if you're not ready to launch your business. With Wix, you can grab yours now and then get to work. Here's why it matters. Back in 2019, I had this killer business idea, but I delayed getting the domain name because
Trump especially enjoyed the outreach from Meta boss, who had barred him from Facebook and Instagram after the Capitol riots in January 2021. At his Mar-a-Lago residence, Trump reportedly made fun of these executives in front of guests. In one instance, he showed the guests a photo of a letter from Zuckerberg's children, who had written that they eagerly waited for the golden age of America. Let me tell you that Zuckerberg has 3 children. All of them are 10 years or younger. For Trump, maybe, this is the ultimate flex, earning endorsement from people still years away from a driver's license. In another instance, he showed a text from Jeff Bezos, which had a smiling selfie of the Amazon founder and his wife. Even Elon Musk allegedly described the phenomenon with 2 words: first-class groveling. Then comes one of the strangest revelations, the panic caused due to the Epstein files. The White House Situation Room, a place normally associated with wars, hostage rescues, and national security crises, was reportedly used to discuss the fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein controversy. According to the book, during those meetings, officials argued about how much the issue was resonating with Trump's supporters. The book also details the US president's liking for pitting his proteges against each other. For example, Elon Musk and US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent got into an expletive-laden fight in the Oval Office. It reportedly also included a fist fight, with Trump later asking who won. Trump reportedly also watched his Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Bessent fight in front of him. Beyond the anecdotes, though, the obliterations and the grudges, the book makes a larger argument. Trump no longer sees himself as the outsider. He is the system now, and he intends to use every tool the system offers without the inconvenience of restraint. Whether that is strength or something more dangerous depends entirely on who you ask. As they say, power does not create character, it reveals appetite. And Donald Trump's second term is revealing an appetite for power that is far greater than his first.
I think that's an interesting segment, and it actually does speak to that. There are some people that are saying that Trump has indeed become the swamp as opposed to being the guy who was supposed to clean up the swamp. And there is some truth to that. Trump was a businessman who transitioned into politics. And when he came into politics, he was relying on the opinion of others. And now that he's in the fray, he knows how things work. And now he's using what he knows to get ahead, to get what he wants passed, to get his bills passed, to get leverage, to get his party behind him. And I guess you could say in some instances, it's something that maybe it's problematic, that he's become a part of the system that he was once trying to correct. But in other instances, you can make the assessment that he's wise, right? Why would you continue to fight a system if you need to use that system in order to get your agenda passed? So in a way, he didn't come to completely demolish the system to a point where he can't get anything done. He still has to operate within it, but in the same breath, he's also has a responsibility to follow through on what he promised his voters. And I think that's what you're starting to see. You're seeing that power can be intoxicating, and that's one of those things that we talked about, right? It's one thing to say, oh, this particular party was corrupt, or this particular president was corrupt, and they had their hand in this basket, and that basket, and this basket. And when you sit in that guy's seat, next thing you know, you might find yourself doing the same things that that person was doing, or being convinced to go into the same pointless wars that the other person was convinced to go into. But it does highlight that apparently there was a rift with Trump. Now, my question is, if there was already a rift with him and the head of Israel, why did he go into the war anyway? Trump isn't typically the guy that, does business with people he don't like that. So there must be some sort of connection to that, right? To those facts. So I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, and some people would say that maybe they had leverage on him with the Epstein files and things of that nature, and that he couldn't say no. But you do have to ask yourself the question, how is it that, Trump finds himself in this position where he didn't instinctually want to go into a war and a conflict? He was dubbing himself as the peaceful president, and then all of a sudden he's in a war and a conflict and saying that we need to take this on as our, as a major agenda item on his presidency. Something changed, right? And what people are trying to do is find the answers to that question.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called US President Donald Trump the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. For years, he praised him, defended him, stood by him. And last year, he even nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Yet, after years of ingratiating himself with Trump, Netanyahu seems to have reached his limit with the American president. Even Netanyahu. The Israeli Prime Minister is now openly talking about reducing Israel's dependence on American military support. Speaking during a meeting with the reserve combat officers in the West Bank, the Times of Israel quoted Netanyahu as saying, and I'm quoting here, "I greatly appreciate the support we have received and that I have secured over the years from our American friends. But today I say we need our own independent weapons production system. We must manufacture our own armaments." Now that is extraordinary. This is a country that receives billions of dollars in US military assistance, a country whose security relationship with Washington has been described as unbreakable. This is something that would have been almost unthinkable just a few years ago. American military support has been one of the foundations of Israel's security strategy. Ronald Reagan transformed the US-Israel relationship in the 1980s. He established a formal framework for strategic cooperation in 1983. This era laid the groundwork for modern military and intelligence partnerships and cemented Israel as a cornerstone of America's defense framework in West Asia. Successive Israeli prime ministers built their defense around this, which is why hearing Netanyahu talk about reducing dependence on American weapons is so remarkable. It's not just about defense spending. It shows just how much political trust has eroded between Netanyahu and Trump, between the United States and Israel. Netanyahu's comments come at a sensitive moment in US-Israel ties. The Trump administration is pressing ahead with talks aimed at turning the recently signed US-Iran deal into a permanent agreement.
Originally, they said, they talk about that they will not develop a nuclear weapon. And some people found it okay. These guys didn't, in all fairness. But some people, but I didn't like it. Said it won't develop. I said, what happens if they should buy? I don't know. It's very dangerous for somebody to sell, because whoever sells them a nuclear weapon will get nuked themselves. If they sold a nuclear weapon, only a few that could do it, they would be nuked. They wouldn't have that country long. So it's a very dangerous thing for somebody to do. But I wanted it in there. So it's develop, procure, buy, anything. And you'll see that when you see the agreement, but it's appropriate that we release the agreement. And we did send a copy to Israel, by the way.
Notice the language. Trump didn't say Israel helped with the agreement. He did not say Israel was at the table. He said Washington sent Israel a copy. Now, for Israel, this is not a consultation. That is a notification, which is why the fear in Israel is that Washington could pressure it to scale back military operations against.
Get your free Thomas Sowell ebook, Trickle Down Theory and Tax Cuts for the Rich. Sowell explains how cutting taxes.
President J.D. Vance publicly reminded Israel that most of its defensive systems were built with American money.
2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the president of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation.
Does that sound to you like the language of equal partnership? No, that is the language of using leverage. When asked about his deteriorating ties with Netanyahu, this is how Trump responded.
Well, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do, but it gets solved. I'm a problem solver. I get problems solved real fast, including with Bibi.
But if Trump was publicly declaring that he expected Netanyahu to fall in line, Netanyahu was sending a very different message. Speaking just a day prior, the Israeli Prime Minister made it clear that Israel has its own security calculations, just like Washington.
Well, what would America do? Would it say, well, there's nothing we can do? Let's hold our fire? Is that what America would say? No. You know damn well what America would do. It would cross the border, create a security zone, kill the terrorists, and protect its people until the threat is removed. That's exactly what we are doing.
Isn't that a stark departure from where things stood just a few months ago, when Netanyahu was saying the exact opposite?
I don't think any two leaders have been as coordinated as President Trump and I. He's the leader. I'm, his ally.
In fact, when Israel was accused of pushing the United States towards war with Iran, Netanyahu rushed to defend Trump.
Can anyone convince Trump? Prime Minister Netanyahu reacts to rumors of Israel pressuring U.S. into Iran war.
Notice how things have changed. Earlier this month, reports emerged that Trump had lashed out at Netanyahu during a phone call over Israel's actions in Lebanon. According to multiple reports, Trump used profane language during his call with the Israeli Prime Minister. Then, during an interview with the Financial Times, Trump said, and I'm quoting again, "I call the shots. He does not call the shots." That was Trump telling the world who the real senior partner is in this relationship. And it's just gotten uglier since then. The US-Israel relationship was built on the assumption that no matter who sat in the White House or who sat in the Prime Minister's office in Israel, the partnership would endure. Today, that assumption is being tested. Just a year ago, Netanyahu was handing Trump a Nobel Peace Prize nomination. A year later, he is openly feuding with the self-proclaimed president of peace.
Okay, that segment spoke specifically to the deteriorating relationship between the United States and Israel on this particular topic. And I have to say, I kind of understand it. It's undeniable that Trump has been probably the biggest, most cooperative, collaborative ally that Israel has ever had. I mean, I don't think that can be questioned. He's been willing to do far more for Israel than most other presidents have been able or willing to do. Right? He's the Netanyahu for 30 years have been trying to convince U.S. presidents to go into Iran and to take military action. Trump is the only one who was willing to actually follow him into that endeavor. Trump is the only one who's been willing to, stand behind them, work with them virtually in a manner that no one else has, right? Obama, right, got a peace deal so that it could kind of quell Israel's points against Iran, right? They could always, and he rallied the world around that so that, Israel essentially, even though they didn't like the deal, they had to oblige by it because he bought so much political support around it. So it's without a doubt that Trump has gone above and beyond for this particular relationship. Now, where it gets sticky is the fact that Trump is dealing with a strong man in Netanyahu that has a strong will in terms of what it is he envisions for his country. And once he's embarked on that militarily attacking Iran, it put into motion the other ambitions that Israel has to expand their territory, which is why they're capturing land in Lebanon right now. And now that that wheel is in motion, there's no turning back from that, right? You can't tell them to pump the brakes when this is what they had planned all along. And Trump walked blindly into that, thinking that he had the authority to push stop on that button anytime he wanted. He's learning real time with real pressure in a real live situation that it's not going to work like that. Those people are going to do what they want to do in defiance of you, and they feel like they have enough leverage to do so. And every single time we tell them no, they go further ahead because, again, they have a lot of allies in the US that is pressuring Trump in ways that he can't just abruptly walk away from the relationship. So it puts him in a very sticky situation. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. This is what most of his supporters, his true supporters, the Tucker Carlsons, the people that was there when it wasn't politically advantageous to be there supporting him, said to him, don't even get into that quagmire because it's quicksand. You're going to eventually sink. And Trump, I think, full of boisterous energy and thinking that he was riding a wave and his popularity would help him solve every problem, walked into that quicksand blindly. And now he's learning the real hard way that those people who try to warn him against taking these measures were right. And now that he's in it, he's got to navigate the relationships with his allies as well as get himself out of this situation that he finds himself in with Iran. And that's what's messy. And there's real world effects happening, and there's a time clock, and there's pressures being applied to the American people, and it's going to have its ultimate effect on Trump. So this is what's going on. This is what he signed up for. And it's unfortunate he finds himself here because there was ample voices telling him not to go down this path. But this is where he wanted to go. He laid his bed. He's got to lay in it. And let's see how it all plays out. Let's go on to the next story.
The much-hyped US-Iran peace understanding, hammered out amid the picturesque calm of the Swiss Alps, is showing cracks already. At this point, we might need divine clarification because calling it a peace deal is ambitious. It would be more accurate to perhaps call it a diplomatic draft instead, or, I don't know, a ceasefire with footnotes. There are key disagreements over various points. For starters, there's Iran's nuclear program. America claims Iran has agreed to nuclear inspections. Iran says no. Although today the head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog said inspections at Iranian nuclear sites were going to happen. No specific timeline was given for it though. Then there's Hormuz. Yesterday, Donald Trump announced that he has approved the opening of the US blockade of Iranian ports near the Strait of Hormuz. He said talks are going well. But if peace has truly arrived, no one seems to have informed the Strait of Hormuz because even as Trump says the critical waterway, which is crucial for global trade, might I add, is open, reality says otherwise. As many as 600 oil tankers are still stranded near the waterway. There are cargo vessels stuck at the strait too. Nearly 1,200 ships carrying goods worth $125 billion Overland transport routes connecting Gulf states are now buckling under pressure as companies scramble for alternatives. But there is some good news. On Monday, traffic through Hormuz was the highest since the war started. According to maritime tracking platform, 37 vessels crossed the strait that day. Now, while that sounds promising, it is nowhere near the pre-war levels. Before this conflict, 135 ships transited the passage every single day, carrying roughly one-fifth of the world's oil and gas. 37 is not a recovery. 37 is a trickle. Iranian media says only a limited number of vessels are currently permitted to cross the strait, and that the number will vary daily, depending on the conditions, of course.
During the war, I wrote in a tweet that the Strait of Hormuz would never go back to the way it was before, and I still hold that view today. That does not mean, however, that we intend to disregard international law or established rules of navigation. On the contrary,
why do we keep repeating the same mistakes when it comes to military conflicts? Maybe it's because we stopped studying.
And then this brings us to the toll question. Tehran has maintained its right to control Hormuz. It has repeatedly signaled its intent to charge what it calls maritime service fee for crossing the strait. Not tolls, but fees. The United States has fiercely opposed this.
Well, that's the law. It's an international waterway. No country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. That's existing international law. That's the way it is in international waterways all over the world, and that's the way we expect it'll be here. So I don't think we have anybody to convince around here in that regard. I think all the countries in this region would agree with us.
Now, today, Trump posted on Truth Social that Iran has informed America of its intent to charge no tolls on ships traveling through Hormuz. Iran and Oman, meanwhile, have announced they will jointly study the cost to be charged. Here's the irony. Before this war, ships crossed the Strait of Hormuz without paying a single penny. The Trump administration set out to make the region safer and trade more secure. Instead, it may have accidentally invented a subscription model for the Persian Gulf. But the memorandum has eased oil prices. Brent crude, that's the international benchmark for crude, fell below $75 a barrel. This is for the first time since the war broke out. But Trump does not seem happy. He announced that he has ordered an investigation into major oil companies over high gasoline prices. You see, gasoline prices are a political issue in the United States, where fossil fuel-powered vehicles are the primary means of transport. Trump has faced criticism for launching this war without fully realizing the impact on fuel costs. And as November's midterm polls draw closer, a recent poll found that Trump's approval rating has fallen back to 34%, returning to the lowest level of his second term. But in Trump's world, his poll numbers are the highest they've ever been. It's 34% in approval, 100% in confidence, I would say. Meanwhile, the diplomatic machinery keeps moving. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Abu Dhabi on Tuesday, the first stop on a Gulf tour aimed at reassuring allies rattled by the war. The Memorandum of Understanding, allies note, fails to address Iran's missile program or its regional proxies, two issues that keep Gulf capitals awake at night. In the UAE, Rubio renewed Washington's commitment to Abu Dhabi's security. Meanwhile, the Qatari Prime Minister traveled to Oman to prepare for talks between the Gulf states and Iran on the future of the Strait of Hormuz. This is where things stand today. One side is announcing breakthroughs, the other is clarifying it never agreed to them. And the world's most critical waterway, carrying one-fifth of all oil and gas, is, in theory, throttled in practice. But being priced like a toll road by Iran for now, the US-Iran peace process is not a deal. It is a relationship status update that reads, it's complicated.
With regards to the Hormuz Strait being open, again, this is a situation where Trump is in a really tough spot. His argument is it is an international waterway, and by international law, you know, it should be open and available to any and everyone. Their argument is you unfairly attacked us, damaged our homes, the infrastructure, our roads. You've essentially unjustly destroyed our communities by this unmerited attack. And now you put sanctions on us, you've constricted us so that our country would somehow buckle, and so that you can accomplish the goal of regime change. In so doing it, you didn't do it after you declared war on us. So you're just running an operation. So there's no legal justification for why you're actually attacking us. And now that we, as a country who's been around for centuries, want to utilize this waterway to charge tolls so that we can use some of those funds to rebuild what you broke, we're in the wrong. That's a valid argument to me. I don't know. If someone illegally broke into my home, destroyed things, and then I found a way that I can utilize funds to rebuild what's been broken by this intruder, I would actually exercise it. And I think they've shown that they are capable of creating a barrier for people to cross, and that no one will actually dare cross if they don't oblige with the barriers that they create. I can't say I'm upset with them. And I think that leverage piece is the piece that's got the US at the table, because they know they're serious about actually blocking that strait. And they have done it, and they will continue to do it. So we have to come to the table with them and either give them the money to rebuild, or we got to allow them the right to earn the money by charging these tolls to do it. Let's think about how toll systems work in the US. If the government's building an infrastructure project, they may charge tolls to build the infrastructure, to repair the roads and do all the stuff. The reason why they're doing that is because the money they get from the tolls is what's supposed to pay back for what they spent out to build the project. So we tax the citizens a higher price to transit for the purpose of utilizing the money to build, to repay the cost of the building up the infrastructure. This seems sensible to me. I don't know why anybody would think differently, but in a way, I'm not opposed to them doing what they feel they got to do to recoup the money. Now, where I think Trump has some leverage is by simply saying, hey, we'll allow you to charge the tolls up until the point you rebuild your infrastructure that was broken by us. So if there's $390 billion of damage, you can charge $390 billion worth of tolls. And we'll keep track of it. And then after that damage that was caused by us has been recouped, then you can go back to opening the strait up free and clear. That makes sense to me. Because now it's understand that there will be charging tolls temporarily, but then once the money's recouped, they're going to go back. To me, that's a sensible approach to negotiating, where you're not taking the option off the table for them, but you're also acknowledging that you caused the damage that they would need to be able to raise the money to fix the damage that was caused, especially when you got sanctions on these people. You're saying you can't go sell and transact with any other country, and you can't, essentially do business, but you have to survive. And there's got to be a mechanism by which you can do that. And we've destroyed your infrastructure. And now we're conceding with you and saying that you are legitimate power, and we do want to have amicable relationships with you, but we're not going to allow you to rebuild in any way. That's crazy. Like, come on. That's an unrealistic bargaining point for Trump to raise. So I do believe that the resolution is somewhere in the middle. Allow them the right to charge the tolls up until the point they recoup the cost of rebuilding the country that we just destroyed. And then after that after that damage has been met, that could be a 5-year, 10-year time frame, then the waterway becomes free once again. That's something that I think both people would be able to sign off on.
Now let's talk about the other war, the one between Russia and Ukraine. The West says Russia's military capacity has been depleted and that Moscow's industries are crumbling. But when you look deeper, the opposite holds true. This week, Russia began working on its 9th nuclear-powered submarine. It will be part of the Yasen-class advanced stealth fleet, and it will pack more than a few punches. The submarine will be equipped with the Zircon hypersonic missiles. Russia remains the only nation to deploy submarine-launched hypersonic weapons. Despite the Western sanctions and Ukrainian drone strikes, Moscow continues to develop some of the most lethal weapons. What makes the Zircon-armed submarine so unique? Our next report tells you more.
For the past few years, the world's attention has been fixed on the battleground in eastern Ukraine. The war is being judged on artillery shells, trench warfare, and drone strikes. The West claims that Russia is suffering heavy losses. They say Moscow's military industries are crumbling. But while the land war remains a meat grinder, it is what's happening beneath the waters that reflects Russia's true power. This week, Russia began work on a new nuclear-powered submarine. It has been named Murmansk, which refers to the largest city north of the Arctic Circle. The Murmansk will be the 9th nuclear-powered submarine of the Yasen M stealth class. For years, Russian submarines were heavily armed but equally loud, making them easy to detect. But the Yasen M class changes that. And here's what will make the Murmansk one of the most lethal submarines in the world. The warship will have advanced stealth features, including a hull that will be made from low magnetic steel wrapped in rubberized, sound-absorbing coating. It'll be driven by a highly compact, water-pressurized nuclear reactor that will allow the submarine to stay deployed for months at a time. And while most nuclear submarines require around 100 crew, the Murmansk will need just 60 crew members. That makes room for more weapons. The Murmansk will carry 40 cruise missiles or 32 hypersonic missiles, or a combination of both. Till now, Russia is the only country in the world to deploy hypersonic weapons that can be launched from submarines. While countries like the US, India, and China are also working on their programs, Russia remains almost a decade ahead in this technology.
If you're so profitable, why do you sell a course? Well, you know what? Here you go. I don't care. It's all free. I'm giving it away. We have like 6 different courses in here. The same strategies that made me a full-time trader. And we have like 24,000 members inside of this group. And none of these people typically apply.
Oxygen to boost the weapon to hypersonic speeds. The Zircon screams through the skies at speeds of Mach 9. That is 9 times the speed will carry the Zircon. The Zircon is not your ordinary cruise missile. It is equipped with a highly advanced scramjet engine that sucks in surrounding oxygen to boost the weapon to hypersonic speeds. The Zircon screams through the skies at speeds of Mach 9. That is 9 times the speed of sound, or 11,000 kilometers per hour. It has a maximum strike range of up to 1,000 kilometers. And unlike a ballistic missile that has a fixed trajectory, the Zircon alters its course mid-flight, making it impossible for air defenses to intercept it. The Russian submarines like the Murmansk will carry 32 of these Zircon missiles. Just imagine the lethality this combination is capable of. When you launch a Mach 9 weapon from a submarine that can't be tracked, the reaction time is reduced to just a few seconds. For an American or NATO aircraft carrier group, a salvo of Zircon missiles launched from an undetected Yasen M-class submarine isn't a threat, it's an existential crisis. For now, the work on the Murmansk has officially started. it will be deployed 5 years from now. However, 4 Yasen M-class stealth submarines, armed with Zircon hypersonic missiles, are already patrolling the waters. And there is a possibility that the Kremlin places an order for more submarines, because Russian President Vladimir Putin has taken a liking to these war machines and is overseeing the projects himself.
Perm has become the first multi-purpose submarine to carry Zircon hypersonic cruise missiles.
The expanding footprint of nuclear-powered submarines that can launch hypersonic weapons means one thing: Putin is playing the long game. He is not slowing down despite the land losses in Ukraine. The former spy-turned-politician seems to be on a mission to neutralize Western military superiority with these stealthy, smart, and lethal submarines.
And now let's turn to Russia's ally, North Korea. For decades, the West looked at North Korea through a lens of mockery. They analyze Kim Jong-un's haircuts. They laugh at the dramatic parades. They treat the country like an isolated land cut off from the modern world. Many Western media outlets love to call North Korea the Hermit Kingdom. It is a comforting narrative, but far from the truth. While the West was dismissing Kim Jong-un, he was busy building. And today, North Korean leader administered a dose of reality at the western port city of Nampo. Kim Jong-un inaugurated a brand new homemade warship. It is called Chohyeon. They say don't judge a book by its cover. But what about naval destroyers? The newly inaugurated warship pays homage to a key leader. Chohyeon was a North Korean general who fought against the Japanese in World War II and against South Korean and American troops during the Korean War. William Shakespeare famously said, "What's in a name?" I guess we should ask South Korea and Japan. So let me tell you more about this warship. The Chohyeon is a 5,000-ton multi-purpose destroyer. It is armed with torpedo launchers and anti-ship missiles, but its prime purpose is to launch a nuclear weapon. This is North Korea's first and only warship that can deliver a nuclear payload. The warship also has anti-aircraft guns on its deck. There is a helipad at the back. It has completed 14 months of rigorous sea trials. The destroyer is now the largest indigenously made warship of the North Korean Navy. And let me remind you, it can deliver a nuclear strike. Naturally, Kim Jong-un wants more. 2 additional orders have been placed, one for a 5,000-ton ship like the one inaugurated today, and the other for a 10,000-ton warship, which means it would be double in size. That means double the firepower. Both the upcoming ships will also carry nuclear weapons. So Kim Jong-un has ticked off 2 things off his checklist: a navy that can launch nuclear missiles and a shipyard that can churn out 2 ships every year. Here's what the North Korean leader announced today.
The program of equipping the Navy with nuclear weapons is following its planned course unerringly. Following the Chohyeon, we will build every year for 2 surface ships.
Pyongyang wants to build 2 warships every year. If they actually manage to do that, it should raise alarm bells in Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington. Currently, the United States is averaging at 1.6 warships a year. American shipyards are facing a massive structural crisis. They are short on skilled workers. They're struggling to maintain current fleets. So they are on the verge of being outproduced by North Korea. In absolute numbers, that's a no. But when we look at the intent, that would be a yes. And the posturing has been drastically dialed up. Kim Jong-un addressed his parliament this week. He said North Korea's nuclear status is now irreversible. He explicitly stated that he will never trade nuclear weapons for anything. Then he officially designated South Korea as the most hostile state by declaring the nuclear status irreversible. Kim Jong-un has achieved 2 things. Number 1, he has sent a direct message to the United States, South Korea, and Japan. The baseline for diplomacy has changed. They can only bargain for peace and forget about the weapons. And the second is a message to the world. Nuclear weapons are the strongest guarantee of regime survival. We've seen what the United States tried with Iran. So has Kim Jong-un, and he is practicing what we call deterrence. Fair enough, but this is possible because of 2 reasons. Russia and China. Both Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have close relations with North Korea. In fact, Russia has played a major role in modernizing Kim Jong-un's military. North Korea gives Moscow thousands of artillery shells for the Ukraine war. Moscow pays back with missile blueprints and naval technology. And China comes in with the funds. The launch of the Choyun is a stark reminder. North Korea is not isolated. The West can keep treating Kim Jong-un as a joke. They thought sanctions would starve North Korea into submission. Instead, we're seeing the rise of a stronger nuclear armed state. Perhaps it is time for the West to wake up and smell the gunpowder.
In this segment, I guess what we're seeing here is that they're pointing out that we are, as a country, are kind of drinking our own Kool-Aid. And our methods of operation isn't that used to be effective during the days of the Cold War isn't as effective now. This notion that you can apply sanctions and starve a country out and try to regime change them the moment you don't like them is not effective, because there's certain countries who have proven that they don't need the validation or the approval of the United States and the Western world. So a country like North Korea has been willing to be viewed and dubbed the, hermit country, where we're making fun of them because we think we're better than them. And we are in probably a lot of ways. But it has not stopped their drive and their willingness to work hard and to produce. And what that country has done has remained extremely self-sufficient, and they've built. To me, the lesson in that is that no matter what other people think about you, if you put your head down, you work hard, you can actually get things done. And this is what some countries are doing. They're finding ways to work without the assistance of the major superpowers who are alienating them. And we got to re-examine how we interact with countries like that. We got to re-examine our tactics, right? As a unit, as a whole. Because if the bullying and the tough talk doesn't stop them from actually acquiring a military weapon, which they already have, we can't go in and pull the same tactics on them that we did on Maduro. It's a different situation. These people are already in, they're locked and loaded. So that's not something that can easily be done. But I also feel like they're becoming a model for other countries to follow. They've stood up against the powers that be, and they've said, we're not going to bow the knee. And for countries that may have doubted that in the past, they're seeing there is a pathway. There are plenty of countries with a lot of money that can follow a similar path, should they want to. And to me, the example is what's probably more of the threat, is the fact that there's been a few countries that stood up to us, the Cubas, the North Koreas, the Irans, and they're still around today, right? And so does that then now create a new trend where a lot of countries decide, look, we're going to carve our own path and we're not going to be told what to do? So the geopolitical tactics that we've been using may need to be revised because they're not as effective. And it seems like more and more countries are advancing militarily, and they're willing to fight, and they're willing to buck up, and they're willing to challenge us. And I don't know that that bodes well for what we're trying to have accomplished.
A powerful heat wave is sweeping across Europe, pushing temperatures far above seasonal norms and disrupting daily life in several cities. It is so bad that the UK has issued a rare extreme heat warning. And in France, 40 people died from drowning as they sought relief from heat. Spain has also recorded its highest daily average temperatures in June since at least 1950. Meteorologists explain that a rare weather phenomenon known as an omega block is responsible for these extreme conditions. So what exactly is an omega block? Our next report tells you.
What comes to mind when I say Euro summer? Picture-perfect postcard moments, alfresco dining, coastal lounging, and late sunsets. But this year, It's none of that. Western Europe is melting under scorching heat. From Paris to Madrid, from London to Rome, European cities are in the grip of one of its most intense heat waves yet. And the scenes across Europe have been extraordinary. France is at the epicenter of this month's heat wave, where 40 people have died from drowning in the past week. In Paris, the heat became so intense that the Eiffel Tower had to close early.
If we didn't have a reservation to eat at Madame Brasserie, we would not have been able to get in because they canceled all reservations to go to the second floor because of the heat wave.
And what's it been like in this heat wave in Paris? Is it overwhelming?
Oh, very overwhelming.
Such is the state of affairs that across France, nuclear reactors are not operating at full capacity because warmer river water limits cooling operations in order to protect the waterways' ecosystems. Even French orals have been rescheduled. Around 10,000 of the 130,000 candidates sitting the baccalaureate exam had their oral tests rescheduled this week. According to reports, 94 million Europeans will experience temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius.
To get started in data analytics, you don't need previous experience or a degree. The Google Data Analytics Certificate will teach you to code in
temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius. That's 2/3 of the entire continent's population. And we're only in June. In Spain, residents say that the heat is giving them sleepless nights.
Well, it's unbearably hot at the moment. You can't even sleep. But I'm having a great time here. I've come here to take my mind off things for a bit, to have a bit of a break from the heat. Because at home right now, no matter what you do, the heat is unbearable. We can't even sleep.
But this heat wave isn't just making people uncomfortable, it's also straining Europe's infrastructure. In the United Kingdom, rail operators warned people to avoid travel unless necessary. Commuters carried minifans, bottles of water, and sunscreen. Simply stepping outside has become a challenge.
Stay inside.
Stay inside, curtains closed, fan on, cold water bottle.
A rare red alert for extreme heat came into force in part of the UK on Wednesday morning, with the Met Office forecasting temperatures potentially as high as 40 degrees Celsius, unprecedented for the time of year. The red extreme heat warning for Wednesday and Thursday extends to parts of central and southern England, including London and Birmingham, the UK's two biggest cities.
Yeah, it took me a while to get to sleep, and I've been up since 4:30. So yeah, it's been quite intense, just trying to keep the house cool. But yeah, had a fan on my face, but woke up at 4:30, so early start. But harder to keep my 4-year-old cool than me.
In Rome, tourists queued for hours outside the Vatican museums, armed with umbrellas, hand fans, and water bottles. Others huddled around public fountains, trying to escape the sun.
We want a beer for the heat.
The Italian capital was one of the 16 cities placed under the highest red heat alert by Italy's health ministry, alongside Milan, Turin, and Verona. All this is further evidence of the fact that Europe has become the world's fastest warming continent. So, what's causing this extraordinary heat? Meteorologists say it has to do with a weather phenomenon called omega block. The name comes from the Greek letter omega because the weather pattern resembles its shape. At its center, a massive high-pressure system becomes stuck. Under normal conditions, the jet stream moves weather systems across the Atlantic. But during an omega block, that flow buckles. The high-pressure system gets locked in place, and so does the heat. The result? Clear skies, little wind, and day after day of rising temperatures. Omega blocks often last for several days, but they can persist for weeks. Now, scientists are still debating whether climate change is making these blocking events more common, but there is far less debate about what climate change is doing to heat waves themselves. The planet has already warmed by about 1.3 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times, and that means every heat wave starts from a hotter baseline. Experts say that Europe's heat waves today are often 2 to 4 degrees hotter than they would have been without human-caused warming. So, when an omega block arrives, it is no longer just a hot spell. It becomes a public health emergency. It becomes a test for the power grids and a challenge for transport networks.
Europe's heat wave is closing schools and putting people's health at risk. We cannot afford further delay. Leaders must prioritize investment in climate-resilient health systems while also accelerating climate action and mitigating the drivers of the climate crisis.
This is just a glimpse of what future summers could look like in Europe, because climate change is turning extreme heat from an occasional event into a seasonal fact of life. So, if you're traveling to Europe this summer to escape the summer heat in your country, be warned. This year, Europe may be hotter than the city you're leaving behind.
Okay. There you have it. It's hot everywhere. I just don't love it when they say that this is related to climate change. I mean, there's no way that we can pin it specifically solely to that, right? We as a people are going to use the climate, and I think the climate knows how to adjust itself accordingly. I don't love these segments where they make it seem like it's, you know, that if we change certain things around, that's going to change how the climate reacts. We don't get to control the weather, right? That's something that's completely and totally outside of our purview. So I won't even tackle that, but I'm not a big fan of the climate change folks that wants you to believe that if you fly less, meanwhile they're flying on a private jet, you know, that somehow you're giving back to the climate and you're doing your part to help the climate. And it's like, you can't determine that, right? Was the earth going to do that anyway? You know, there's a lot of these things that's outside of our control, and to start pinning it, you know, to a particular thing when you can't undo what's happening with the climate. You can't manipulate the climate. The climate is the climate. And so you just have to accept that at different points in time, the climate will shift and adjust itself accordingly. That's all part of God's design. It's not up to us. So I don't particularly agree with that, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who, you know, share a different opinion. Well, that's it for us. Thank you for joining us for this particular segment. Obviously, we like to keep you up to date with what's going on in the world, as well as what's impacting us here. And that being said, I ask that if you're not already a subscribed member of the show, like and subscribe and stay connected to the show so that we can continue to keep you updated. Also, weigh in on the various segments that we responded to today. What are your thoughts on the latest developments in the Iran war, with the relationship the U.S. has with Israel, with the advancements in nuclear weaponry from some of our enemies? What are your thoughts? Share your thoughts, weigh in, and let your thoughts be heard as well. All right, guys, thanks again. It's yours truly, Mr. B, signing off. Have a blessed day.